We saw some really, really incredible testimony yesterday from that man, the defendant himself, because he took the stand. Let's not forget that this officer, well, I should say former police officer, is on trial for the murder of 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. He allegedly fired his service rifle into a car packed with teenagers, including Jordan Edwards was in that car, fired multiple rounds, ultimately killing this young man. And the question is, why? Well, what we heard from him on the stand, and which we knew based upon reports going into this case, is that they were going to, him and his partner, Officer Gross, were trying to break up a house party that night when all of a sudden gunshots rang out at a nearby nursing home. They ran out. His partner wanted to stop every car at that location, including the one that was driving Jordan Edwards. And when the car refused to stop, Officer Gross tried to stop the car by banging the back windshield. It was at that moment, which is all captured on body cam footage, that you see Officer Oliver, the defendant, fire that rifle. He claimed that he felt that that car was a threat to his partner and to anyone else around. He did not know whether or not that car actually contained the shooters or what was going on. But based upon a very strong case put forward by the prosecution, including use of force experts, they have made the claim that this was not a justifiable use of force and that this man should be found guilty. We have a lot to talk about in that case. We believe that it may wrap up today. We might see the closing arguments from both sides. So stay tuned. That's the Roy Oliver case out of Texas. But as you know, that's not the only case we cover here on Law and Crime. We are also going to focus heavily on the Shayna Hubers case out of Kentucky. Now, you might be saying to yourself, that's the defendant. That's right, because she took the stand for the last 2 days. This has been a remarkable case to watch, where this young woman has been charged with the murder of her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. She shot him 6 times, claimed self-defense, that she was the victim of sexual and physical abuse at the hands of her boyfriend, and that she, at that moment, felt her life was in danger. But based upon the evidence put forward by the prosecution, they're saying that's not the case at all, that she is a cold-blooded murderer and there was no threat to her life. Another interesting case where another defendant got on the stand. But before we talk about the Hubers case, before we talk about the Oliver case, we got to go to Connecticut. Because yesterday there was the sentencing hearing in the Nikki Yovino case. You might remember this young woman. She falsely claimed that 2 Sacred Heart University football players raped her. Well, when she made that false claim, she was charged and convicted of 2 counts of second-degree false reporting of an incident and 1 count of interfering with police. Yesterday was her sentencing hearing, and she was sentenced to 1 year behind bars, and she got a lashing from the judge. What I want to play for you right now, in case you missed it, is her attorney's press conference after the sentencing. Take a look.
Just say that this is obviously a difficult day for Nikki and her family. This is a serious punishment that she is going to face, and I think her willingness to accept this this plea deal reflects her accountability for what happened. At this point, we're going to focus on her serving her time and working on her getting back to her family and continuing to be a good contributing member of society that she had been for her entire life up to this point. So that's all I have to say at this point. If you have any questions, I may have an answer for you, but I'd like to...
What made her decide to take the plea deal last minute?
Can't comment on that.
Forgive me for the question, but it looked like she was rolling her eyes during the victim impact scene.
She was not.
I was sitting there looking at it.
She wasn't.
Why didn't she address the court at all today?
Nothing else to say.
Okay, a couple of things there. That was Ryan O'Neill, her attorney. Did you hear that question about the eye rolling? Did that sound familiar? Because that was our very own Aaron Keller. We sent him down there. But I want to ask, I want to find out a little bit more about what all this means. And joining me right now, I'm so happy to have her. We have a very special guest, criminal defense attorney Rachel Kugel. Rachel, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So, first of all, press conference. Should he be wearing sunglasses? I don't think so.
No,
but that's
probably not, unless he's sponsored by Ray-Ban.
Exactly. What do you think happened here? Why do you think she took this deal and 1 year in prison? You think that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. One is, obviously she avoided a felony. And, she's a young person, arguably with a life ahead of her, with a career ahead of her. And a lot of times, we make decisions as defense attorneys where, maybe it's worth taking some time in order to avoid the felony charge on your record. I think that was part of what was at play here. I also think that she was probably up against facing a lot more time. And, let's face it, she wasn't particularly liked or, sympathetic. So as a defense attorney, you have to consider that. Like, where are we going with this, right? And this may be the best way to sort of cut our losses and accept responsibility and try to move her on.
I mean, it's a really nightmare situation where it both denigrates the people who really have suffered
Correct.
sexual assault, but also to be falsely accused of that. For those players, that's a mark that's going to be hard for them to wash away.
Right, and we know, I mean, in the age of Google and everything, forever, when you Google those players' names, that's what's going to come up. That's the first thing that's going to come up. And the fact that it's, it turned out to be a false allegation is something they then have to explain. They have to overcome that. So I think it is, honestly, as a defense attorney, I think it is a fair punishment because it's rare that we see the prosecutor go after someone for anything more than just filing a false report, which is relatively low-level offense, all things considered.
Hey, listen, 1 year in prison is no picnic for anybody, and that's not going to be easy for Nikki Yovino, but we'll let everybody know if we have an update about her situation. What I want to do right now, before we talk about any of our live trials, there is always so much happening in the news. So here's a special report about what else is trending across the country today.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. A police officer in St. Louis is facing charges after breaking a retreating man's jaw with a flashlight. 40-year-old Officer Adam Feyaman allegedly beat 24-year-old Jamal White after White asked why his car was being towed.
Look off me, bro. Get off me. How am I under arrest? Get on the motherfucking ground. Get on the motherfucking ground. Stay back. Stay back, sir.
Feyaman, the 2016 4th District's Officer of the Year, now faces charges of second-degree assault and armed criminal action. A man in Utah is under arrest after reportedly beating his wife to death with a crowbar and injuring his daughter before calling a local news affiliate to confess to the killing. 54-year-old Walter Brantzeg reportedly launched an attack on his estranged wife, 50-year-old Valerie Brantzeg, and his 13-year-old daughter at their home. Brantzeg then called Fox 13 and several other news outlets to confess to the killing before authorities came to arrest him. Brantzeg is in custody, awaiting his first scheduled court appearance. 2 police officers in Colorado were suspended for leaking body camera footage showing the son of Denver's mayor threatening officers during a traffic stop. Officers Paul Timmons and Judy Gurley Lutkin were suspended for 1 day after an internal investigation revealed the officers leaked the video of 22-year-old Jordan Hancock losing his cool during a traffic stop. Hancock eventually apologized to the officer and paid a $275 speeding ticket. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law & Crime.
Thanks, Anthony. Pretty incredible stories. You can go to lawandcrime.com to learn a little bit about them as well as the top trending stories of the day. But we got to talk about that stop right there and what that means. Let's bring back in Rachel Kugel. Rachel, suspended for a day. Did they do anything that wrong?
I mean, they certainly went against procedure in, in making sure that the media got wind of this video. What's interesting to me is it seems like more and more all of our stories are about body cam footage in one way or another, and that's interesting to me is what we're seeing across the country is more and more use of those body-worn cameras by police officers. I mean, just this morning we've had 3 or 4 stories, including the main one we're covering, that all is about body cam footage, and I think we're just going to see more and more of that.
Hey, listen, from Law & Crime's perspective, it's fantastic. We get to cover all of it, but you can't hide anything. You can't hide what you say. You can't hide what you do.
Yeah.
And that man himself, that young man, you think he's going to want that going viral?
No, absolutely not. Although, anything that is part of any criminal case is potentially public record. So really anybody could see it. It's just that most people, don't see it as a practical matter in most cases. But I mean, these things are public record. They're out there, and the body cams are there to protect really both sides, right? As defense attorneys, we get to see what happened without just taking an officer's word for it. But they're also there to protect officers potentially if there's a police-involved shooting or something like that.
Absolutely. And as you said, we're covering it in the Roy Oliver case as well. But when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about Shayna Hubers because she took the stand.